Hello YouTube and welcome to the channel. Now then, today's video is going to be concerning this baby, MN Models D99S. Long story short with it, somebody's approached me and asked me if I can modify it for them. They've provided a bag of trick bits and obviously the MN, and I said yes, as long as I can make some YouTube videos out of it, and they said of course. So that's where we're up to. Now then, the bits we have so far, because we're ordering some electronics for this, so we're basically sort of covering chassis today. So we've got some axle hangers here, axle brackets. We've got some of the brackets to accept the top of some shocks themselves. We've got a 2-speed motor and gearbox from WPL that we've got to shove in. The electronics for that are on their way. We've got some axle tie rods here, a packet of, some wheel weights, and of course the obligatory metal drive shafts. So we're going to properly bling this thing up. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the body. Let's have a look at the chassis and we'll take it from there. Okay, that's the body off it. I mean, there are a couple of screws at the back, and there are a couple of screws, oh well, you can't really see there, but they live underneath the bonnet, and I always take the bumper off as well. That just makes it easier. So we are basically replacing all the running gear apart from the axles with our trick metal items here. So what I'm basically going to have to do is strip everything off the chassis, including the motor, because we are fitting a 2-speed. Just haven't got the electronics for it yet. But like I say, we've got shocks, everything else, so all of the underpinnings and running gear, that's all got to be taken off as well. So I'll do that, and I'll get back to you. Right then, that's the chassis stripped down. We've got rid of all the plastic bits and pieces we don't require. All that's left really is the frame rails and 2 axles, which we're going to utilise. I've taken the motor and the board off because we're swapping the motor and the electronics obviously. Now I think I'm going to start with these shock absorber hangers, because they have to be sort of mounted to the frame like that. But on the MN we've got these little nodgers that accept the original, so I've got a sneaky feeling I'm going to have to chop them off before we can get these to fit. And it might be worth actually taking the board out, because we've got to basically remove that plastic nodger there. So I'm going to do that and I'm going to get back to you. Now then, this is known as the point of no return, because I've fitted the hangers on this side, but to do so I've had to cut those little nodgers off there, so we can't actually go back and fit the original suspension, so we've got no choice but to go forward. I've also used a bit of thread lock on the bolts that go into the hangers, and I used my crafty Sir Stanley of knives to trim out those little bits there in order to make way for those little bits there. So I shall repeat the operation on the other side, and then we'll move on to another bit. Now that all 4 of our shock absorber mounting brackets are on, I'm going to put the brackets on the actual axles themselves. That should be fairly straightforward, because I'm going to utilise the original self-tappers, because they're the plastic axles, so they don't require any of these bolts really. So it should be fairly straightforward. Now, I don't know actually whether I've put these on the correct way up, but I suppose we'll find out in time. So I'm going to bang these on, and I'm going to take it from there. So this is where we're at so far. I've bolted the axle brackets onto the top of the axles. There's no issues there, you just use the self-tappers that come with the truck. I'm just trying to map out now and get my head round where everything else goes. Just started assembling the suspension. I've come across one issue in the fact that the bolt heads go straight through the holes on the frame, but if I can locate some little washers, that should put an end to that. We're losing the light here in the UK, it's early evening now, so I'll probably have a look for the washers tomorrow and continue on with fitting the metal suspension. A quick sit rep then. It's been approximately a week since I've started to build. I'm just waiting for some bits and pieces to turn up. I've got some little washers to stop the screws from pulling through the other side of the frame. I mean, I have continued to sort of mock up where the bits and pieces are going to go. I've got to remove the drive shafts as well because they've got to come off because we're putting metal ones on. But the other thing I bought off eBay was this 2-speed lift kit. Now this is specifically designed for the MN, fits in the frame, and it effectively lifts the motor up high enough, hopefully, to clear all these tie rods here, because they actually foul the gear change if you don't. So that's where we're up to at the moment. I shall continue on with mocking up the suspension, and we shall put the motor in, and hopefully we'll see if everything clears everything it should. I've pretty much got the rear suspension mocked up into its rough final position. Couple of things, or couple of problems. Even with the lift kit on the motor, it's still doesn't lift it high enough in the frame, the motor that is, to clear the gear change mechanism on this tie rod. So I think what I'm going to have to do is drill a couple more holes a little further up and move it higher still. Now this will create another problem as the bodywork that sits on. I might have to take a piece of bodywork out near to the transmission tunnel, but so be it. I don't think there's any easy way around it unless we start bending and messing with this tie rod here, or chop the end of the gear change arm off. But I don't really want to do that because I think it might cause more trouble than it's worth. The other thing was that the drive shaft angle, when I moved the motor higher up, was a little bit more acute, so we've almost got two right angles where it exited the axle and the gearbox. So what I've had to do is sort of adjust these tie rods and angle the rear axle back a little, so it makes the angle at which the drive shaft exits the axle a little bit more drive shaft friendly. So what I'll do now is we'll put a couple of holes in the frame, move the motor up, mount that, and then start on the front. Also, I've used the old Dremel here and slotted, I don't know if you can see that, probably not, slotted, there we go, the end of the axle shaft to accept the metal drive shafts and the little grub screw that secures them on. So we'll go ahead, we'll start on the front, and hopefully the steering and everything will line up. And now that the front suspension is assembled and the tie rods have been put on, etc., it's an excellent opportunity to show you how the sort of acute drive angle you end up with. Because I've moved the motor further up in the frame, you can see there that drive shaft angle there's too acute really, and it'll put too much strain on not only the output shaft on the gearbox but also the axle itself. But what I'll do is I'll adjust these two top tie rods because they're all adjustable, and I'll show you what a difference it makes to the angle of the drive shaft. And after a quick couple of turns on these top two tie rods here, you can see that we end up with a much more friendly drive shaft angle, both for the axle and for the output on the gearbox. So that's pretty much as far as we can get at the moment. I'm waiting for the receiver and transmitter off WPL. We're using the RES-V3 system because we've got the 2-speed, and since moving the 2-speed up in the frame, the actual gear actuation mechanism now clears all of the suspension, so that shouldn't be an issue anymore. We're going to have to cut possibly the transmission tunnel out of the body shell because this I can almost guarantee will interfere with that. But like I say, that's for another video. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it in the next one. As ever, if you've enjoyed the video and you found it of some use and interest, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you're feeling that way inclined, hit the subscribe button for more similar future content. And don't forget to join me again for part 2, where we put the shell on and hopefully install the electronics, and more importantly, we get to take it out for a run. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you again soon.